We want to look at some specific strategies that can help with student engagement in the elementary grades. This is the first session where we'll look at some specific things. And they're taken from this excellent book, which is in our teacher resource library, Total Participation Techniques by Persida and William Hemley. You can check that book out for more details and for more strategies you can try out. We're just going to summarize a few of them. One of the important things to keep in mind is that we want to use these to press students toward higher order thinking skills. Remember that engagement is not the same thing as activity. Students can be active and busy on something, but not truly engaging their minds. We want to stimulate the students to use their minds actively, to stretch themselves mentally, to grow in their mental abilities. That comes from moving further up the scale here in Bloom's taxonomy. Now, the lower order thinking skills are needed. Students need to remember and comprehend things. But that's not what is going to engage the students, and we need to press beyond that. So you want to use these strategies in conjunction with higher order thinking skills. The first strategy is called Think, Pair, Share. Here's how it works. You pose a question or problem and give the students a few seconds to think about it. That's the think part of it. Then they turn to their neighbor and tell each other what their thoughts are to discuss it. That's the pair part of it. Then you call on several individuals from those pairs to share with the class what they talked about. Now, this process does several things. First, by giving students a few seconds individually, it allows students to think more than just the superficial answer. Generally, when you ask a question, students can come up with something right off the bat, but it doesn't have a lot of depth to it. They're more likely to come up with better answers if you give them a few seconds to think. Second, the pairing with one another and explaining their answers helps them verbalize their thoughts. Verbalizing thoughts helps crystallize and develop your thoughts. And then explaining it one-to-one is a lot less threatening than voicing that to the class. I mean, if one student comes up with something that's kind of off the wall, the other one can kind of help them figure it out. And it helps students to learn from each other and refine each other's thoughts. Third, when you have some share their answers with the class, then they're going to be more confident when they do that. They're not being called on the spot. They've already thought through what they could say. And again, you really need to be doing this with questions that involve higher order thinking. I mean, there's not a lot of point in doing Think, Pair, Share if the question is, what's the first book in the Bible? But it might be, what are two important things you learn from the first book of the Bible? Or even, why do you think Genesis is the first book in the Bible? Some questions like this that are a bit more in-depth thinking are the type of things you want to do. Next strategy, quick write. You come up with a question or a writing prompt and then give them a fixed amount of time to think and write down their thoughts, maybe 3 to 5 minutes. Then maybe you follow that up with a pair share. Again, this gives students time to think about what they're going to say and allows them to come up with more developed responses. And to be sure that you move toward higher order thinking, it might be helpful to include applications in your prompt. For example, if you've just been studying in history about Christopher Columbus, you might say, well, how might things have been different if Columbus' ships had been lost at sea before they got back to Spain? Or, if Columbus had had a camera, what do you think he would have taken pictures of to send back to Spain? Why those things? So get them to be thinking a bit more in depth. Similar to quick write is quick draw. Now, this isn't only for young children, it can be used for children of all ages, even adults. So what are you doing here? Well, select a big idea or a major concept from the unit or lesson. Then ask students to draw something that represents that concept. Have the students share and explain their picture with a partner or in a small group. Now, I'm not talking here about things like draw the house that Billy lived in, but something more like, our unit in science is about weather. Draw a picture of some type of weather that helps you learn more about the nature of God. I'll give you 5 minutes for this. Again, remember the focus here. Higher order thinking skills which lead to greater student engagement. Another quick exercise is ranking. Now, we're not talking here about just putting things in order like you read a story and then say, what order did these things happen in the story? Instead, we're thinking here about ranking in importance. You select some items, concepts, steps, paragraphs that can be analyzed and ranked. These should not be something obvious like rank these in order of importance for us to live: air, toys, food, computers. But give them something that requires some thought, and especially things that there might be some disagreement about. Ask students to rank them according to some specified criteria, and ask them to justify their order. Maybe allow them to pair-share their thoughts after they come up with it. So, for example, we just read some causes for the American Revolution. Rank these in order from most important to least important in what caused the revolution, and then be able to explain why you put them in this order. Now, another method is a jigsaw. We did this in our pre-planning. To do this, divide your class into groups, and you use this with things where there might be 3 or 4 different portions or different segments or different topics that are all related together. Divide your class into groups. Each group has one element or aspect of the topic you're studying, and they read and learn about that one thing. They become the experts on their topic. Then they split into new groups. So each new group has one expert from each of the old groups. Now the experts teach the others in their group about their topic. So at the end, each student has learned about all the topics. This builds on the concept that we learn something better when we teach others about it. So here's an example. Let's say in science class you're learning about types of clouds. Divide the class into 4 groups. Each group has a handout describing one type of cloud. In their group, they read it over and come up with answers to questions like describe the cloud, what's the height in the atmosphere, that type of thing. Then, after their group has come up with their answers, then they split up, so you have 4 new groups, but each new group has one child from each of the original groups. Each group has one child who's an expert on one type of cloud. Then in those new groups, the children explain to the others about their cloud, with the other children taking notes from each other. One thing this does is to address the typical problem we have when we start talking about working in groups. The idea that one person does all the work and the others just kind of coast. With the jigsaw approach, every member of the original group needs to learn the material because they're all going to have to teach others. Is that guaranteed? No, but it's going to help. Now in our next video, we're going to look at the use of response cards, or what the authors of the book call hold-ups. There are many ways we can use this, so we'll look at some of those then.